Okay, I wanted to quickly go over ingredients. What ingredients I have has nothing to do with what you have. I happen to be doing a honey stout. Okay? You might not be, so that really doesn't matter. But what you should have for an extract kit is, what I've got here is 6 pounds of, this is ultralight malt. These used to come in these like plastic, what I call pickle jugs. Now More Flavor, More Beer produces them in these Mylar bags, which while it makes them a little harder to get all of the volume out, I do like the Mylar bags. I'm not going to say anything bad about those guys. They're great, they're sealed, there's no air inside them like there was with the jugs, so that's a good thing. Okay, we've also got half a pound of a light dry malt extract, which is this here in powdered form. We've got our specialty grains, we've got a little bit of maltodextrin, we've got some various hops. Now, like I say, your ingredients may differ from these depending on whose kit you have and all that kind of thing. But the way it works out is we've got our specialty grains that are going to go into the water to not boil, but just to simmer for a while and impart their specific characteristics to the boil. Then we're going to start adding the sweeteners, effectively, your DMEs, your liquid malt extracts, all that. And then that's where we're going to get into the boil. The hops are going to play their part at different intervals. In this case, I've got Kent Goldings, which are going to be going in for, which ones are the Kents? Kent Golding, which is going to go in for the entire boil. This is for the bittering aspects of the beer, the overall just bittering. And then there's a little bit of Northern Brewers, which is for flavoring. That's going to come in towards the end. And right at the very end, in this case, Amarillo, which is just for that aroma. Now, these are hop pellets. You can also get hop flowers, which, are obviously going to be larger, so come in bigger bags. That's why these bags are so small for a half an ounce or a full ounce, that kind of thing. I am using a mechanical thermometer. My digital thermometer, I've burned through 3 digital thermometers, so either I'm doing something wrong or they're failing me. So at this point, I'm using a mechanical. The thing I like about my digital timer was that it had not only was it a thermometer, but it was a timer. So I could say, tell me if you hit this temperature, tell me if you hit this time, that kind of thing. So I'm going to have to play a little bit closer attention because this thing obviously isn't going to cry. Alright, what we're going to do at first is we're going to get this thing lit off. We've got our water in here. There it is, nice and clean. We're going to bring it up to about 150, 155 degrees. At that point, we're going to put our specialty grains in a bag, and in this case I'm using a reusable nylon mesh bag. I say reusable because it can be cleaned and sterilized and reused. And that's going to go into the hot but not boiling water for no less than a half an hour. It's going to basically stew to get all those flavors and whatever the grains are going to do into that mix. Okay, so let's get this lid off, and I'm not going to let you guys watch for a half hour. We'll get this lid off, get it up to temperature, and then I'll show you putting the grains in. Okay, burner is off and the water is slowly climbing. We're up around 90 now. Getting that up to 150. I wanted to point out that it's not really necessary to sterilize your spoon because it's going into the boil, but all these little fiddly parts, at this point, we're not going to need a lot of equipment. We're just going to boil, and we're going to go straight from the boil into the fermenter, which has been cleaned and rinsed and is now drip drying. But all these little fiddly parts, my fermenter is actually a bottling bucket, so it does have a valve in it. So I've taken that apart. There's your valve, the internal nut that holds it on, and the external washer that keeps it from leaking. Here's the 3-piece airlock I use. The other piece, the lid, and the floater is all in there. And a cork, which is the correct size for what you're putting it into. If you're going to put it into a carboy, it's going to be a bigger cork. But this is the one to go into my bottling bucket, which has a small hole, so the airlock slides into that. So these things are floating in a week. This is actually an iodophor solution. I love iodophor. The only time I had a batch that scared me was the only time I didn't use iodophor. That's all I can say about that. I did have a batch that I considered to be bad. There might be people out there that didn't. It didn't really taste bad. It was a smoky porter. It was alright, but the carbonation wasn't right, and it did have a little bit of a film right around the neck where it sat. Some people would have drank that and never noticed any difference, but I considered that a bad batch. So I had a few, and I noticed the difference, and I ended up tossing them all. So we mourned those. But it was the only batch I ever did that I didn't use iodophor. Okay, so those things are waiting to be used. That's it for equipment, really, to go from. On brew day, you're going to use your boiling pot, and you're going to use your fermenter. In this case, I'm going with the plastic because it's going to be easier to show you guys what to do. I could opt to go with my glass, and there's the lid doing its, drip drying. But that requires the funnel, and it's a little trickier, and unfortunately, the really cool thing about this new boiler I have is that it's got this sweet little valve, which has got a 3/8 inch threaded end. So later on, I can use that for different things. The bad thing about it is once this is constructed, the valve makes it impossible to get it past this top ring that holds the frame together. So you actually can't lift this bucket out of the frame. This is one of those things where safety was totally in their minds, so it's very hard to knock this thing over should you be frying a turkey and want to blow yourself up. So what I'm going to have to do, unfortunately, is once it's cooled down, I got to pick this whole thing up and dump it. So it's going to be a lot easier to go into the plastic fermenter. Since we're talking about safety, one other thing, it's not terribly cold today, and great, it's not windy because wind is terrible, but you can see I've got the garage door open about a foot. I'm not worried so much about any kind of exhaust this thing's putting off, but it does suck up oxygen. So since I'm doing it into the garage, I've got an oxygen supply. I'm just pointing that out to you guys because if you don't do it, you're kind of loopy. And I don't want my house door open the whole time because it's relatively cold and all that. Okay.